Anybody ever have to do this? What's pictured here? A stress test? And they say to you, get on the treadmill and run until you fall down from exhaustion. Ah, but while you're doing that, you are going through different modes of energy harvesting. The only molecule that you need to make is ATP for your cells, right? Because if you make ATP, it can detach all your cross bridges, but the source from which you harvest that ATP and the method that you use to harvest it, that changes as you exercise and you exhaust different storehouses of energy. When you are at rest, the mitochondria in your cells are taking oxygen from myoglobin, which it's just a red pigment in muscle that binds oxygen. And your cells are also taking glucose from glycogen, which is a polysaccharide. And all of this makes ATP. This is called cellular respiration. And we discussed it previously a little bit. We hit on it, that it's the main source or preferred source of ATP. But if you are on the treadmill of death in a stress test, you're going to exhaust that supply of ATP, but pretty quickly. Your muscles will be using more than what your muscles can produce. And at some point, your muscles will switch over to something called anaerobic fermentation. Anaerobic fermentation is your muscles saying, okay, you're not breathing enough. I can't get enough oxygen. I've exhausted all of my myoglobin. So I'm going to make ATP for you without oxygen. And, sorry, because as a byproduct, I'm also going to make lactic acid that's going to eat away at your muscle proteins. But hey, you're just not giving me what I need. And we know that acids denature proteins. Muscle fibers are full of proteins. And so, that's not great, right? As your body's making the switch from as your body's making the switch from aerobic to anaerobic fermentation, there's some enzymes that are also trying their very best to make ATP during that switch. They're like, hey, I'll hold you over. The action of these enzymes is referred to as the phosphagen system. And there's two main enzymes, myokinase and creatine kinase. So there are companies nowadays that sell supplements that claim to provide these two enzymes and the type of molecules that they convert to ATP. So you get this little powder, you put it in a sports drink before you start exercising, and it gives you more energy for that holdover. Do they work? I don't know, you'd have to ask the FDA. Oh, wait, you can't, because there's no entity investigating if these kinds of products do what they claim to do. Hey, buyer beware. At this point, I'm not saying that they don't work. I've heard from many people that there are ones that do. So just putting that up. At this point, though, you've only been running on the treadmill of death for a minute, maybe 3 to 5, and you've probably exhausted all these forms of available energy. And now your ability to keep going is solely based on your heart's ability to pump enough oxygen to your tissues. And this is why this test is called a cardiopulmonary fitness test. Okay, so if you're a long distance runner who manages their pace and heart rate to avoid even the possibility of exhausting energy sources, you will switch back to cellular respiration. In sprinting, muscle fibers use anything that's already in the muscle to make you ATP. But once those are exhausted, the things readily available in your muscle, your mitochondria will start to ask for oxygen and glucose from your blood. Carbohydrates are going to be the first organic energy sources that you exhaust. Did you eat a bagel before you did the stress test? Well, you're going to dip into those carbs. Depending on the person, 20 to 40 minutes into the regulated exercise, the mitochondria are going to start harvesting lipids from the blood and deposits to make ATP. So at this point, now we're dipping into that fat burning stage. No, they don't make you stay on the treadmill of death for 20 minutes. It's usually like 10, 15. If you push beyond this, if you push beyond all of these sources, that's actually going to make you be harvesting the energy for the muscle proteins themselves a little bit. So we'll talk about this. Next slide. Next slide. If you keep going, okay, if you push beyond all your carbs, all your lipids, harvesting of lipids, if you keep going at full speed, your oxygen demand is going to eventually exceed what you can take in with your respirations. And your body's going to start to harvest stored oxygen in organs such as the liver. When you're done with your sprint, or 26.2 miles, you'll still be breathing heavily, and you'll feel as though you can't stop that, like you can't catch your breath. Yes, your liver and the other organs that gave you the oxygen want payback. So your respirations are going to continue to be really deep and really frequent until you pay these organs back, even though you're no longer exercising. And this is what is called oxygen debt. And this is what happens in tandem with you exhausting parts of your energy resources like carbs and lipids. What ends up happening is this. This is what restricts you with exercising. And this is why exercising with a heart rate monitor is a very useful thing. By managing your heart rate, you can prevent yourself from hitting the wall. But I mean, the test on the treadmill of death, that test is designed to get you right up to hitting the wall. So I am a former athlete. I tried many times to do long distance running and swimming, and it wasn't my thing. I am definitely made for sprinting. So people who do sprints and people who do like long distance events, they are two different types of people. They are. Just like fast-acting muscles, which are over here on the left, that surround your eye, like the ocular motor cranial nerve, fast-acting muscles are very different than the huge weight-bearing muscles in your lower body. There are different types of muscle fibers. And these two classifications here are the extremes of that spectrum. But as you can see in the center of this picture, an entire muscle can contain both types of muscle fibers. The purpley fibers are referred to as fast twitch muscle fibers. These are muscle fibers that are used for sprinting. And these fibers they're fast acting. They use glycolytic energy sources, but they're easily fatigued. The muscles in your hands are fast twitch. And if you use them too much, like writing essays all night, then they'll start to fatigue and they give you writer's cramp because they're not made to do that. Slow twitch muscles, in contrast, they use cellular respiration as their primary method of making ATP. These muscle fibers are great for marathon runners, and I mean, most of them are present in your legs, because these take a long time to fatigue. But their time to fatigue depends on your ability to keep yourself out of oxygen debt. So keep your heart rate within a reasonable range for your age, and basically just don't exercise like you're punishing your body, which is how I exercise. I personally, I don't know if there's any other way to exercise, and I think after hearing many lectures here, it probably comes to no surprise to you all that I used to exercise like that, and I was a sprinter in my days. Honestly, if you wanted me to run a mile and make it around a quarter-mile track like more than once, I would just look at you and say, yeah, I don't do that.